All right, lights, camera, action.
Hey,
Welcome to Conversations with Charlie with our special guest today, Boaz Yakin.
nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Boaz. Uh, an iconic veteran director and of my generation. Not always the case. Yeah,
Right, very kind of you, but yeah.
we go back. So tell me a little bit about what you're up to right now. Let's get started with that, and we'll get this first ever COVID-19 episode of our podcast in complete isolation in our homes. I'm here in Brooklyn and Park Slope. Where are you?
I'm in the Hamptons where I splurged to get my 85-year-old parents out of the city before things went bananas. So we got a place and we're here for a couple of months out of the way, chilling out, doing our self-imposed exile from the city thing.
That's wonderful. Best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's cool.
Yeah, less density, just more space between people.
Yeah. We don't see anyone here. I shop once a week and that's it, which is actually only like 10% removed from what my everyday normal life is like.
Except
I
there are
have
birds outside, seagulls, and yeah.
I have friends who are going crazy from the social isolation, and I'm like, I never see anyone anyway. I'm just home all day, and I go buy some food or get takeout and watch movies at night. Like I and maybe see a friend once a week. So this is like 10% removed from my normal everyday life.
It's funny. My girlfriend's a journalist, and her life is very much the same. She says the only thing I don't like is now when I want to go out, I can't go out and socialize if I want to socialize.
Right.
But her day really hasn't changed in this scenario. You're a writer. You work at home. You write. Wherever you are, you're running. Yeah.
But it's crazy times and it is strange. I mean, we have social media so we can stay in touch with our friends, and all that. But so that's what I'm doing. Luckily, actually, I had a movie that I had recently made called Aviva.
Wonderful. Let's talk about that.
It was supposed to premiere at South by Southwest, and like all the other films that from every other festival, probably for the next half year, it got canceled. But it looks like we're going to have some kind of virtual, or what do you call it? Not virtual, but video streaming distribution starting in June.
But it's a hybrid. It's a brand new. This is very important. This is a brand new model because there's subscription, there's VOD, iTunes, or pay per view, pay for screening, pay for rental, and then this is a new form of streaming through theatrical exhibitors. So you go to the theatrical exhibitors if you're buying a ticket to a movie in a movie theater.
Right, exactly.
And you become a moviegoer through a movie theater chain to watch online. This is all brand new.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, it seems like in a way the theaters that are taking your movie, especially if it's an independent movie, are sort of functioning as curators for the movie. You know what I mean? And so for the first part of the run, it goes through the Landmark Theater. So it's as if you're going to see the movie, if you want to see the movie, you have to buy a ticket through Landmark, as opposed to going into the actual movie theater, but you're still seeing it through the Landmark website. And then, your film gets reviewed, hopefully, and people pay attention to it. And then it goes to like iTunes and all that. And then you look to sell it. It's essentially the same thing as what happened with a film normally, except rather than an actual movie theater, the movie theater is functioning as a portal for you to be able to see it through streaming.
Right. So, wonderful. So tell me a little bit about Aviva, the film itself. I don't know very much about it.
Well, Aviva is a really, really unique and somewhat experimental movie for a narrative. It's a dance movie, and it features some of the most incredible contemporary dancers in the world right now. Bobby Jean Smith, who came from the Batsheva Dance Company in Israel, the great Batsheva Dance Company. or Schreiber, Zina Zinchenko, Tyler Phillips, these incredible dancers. And but basically, it's in one way, it's a relationship movie about a man and a woman who meet long distance, fall in love, and get married, and their relationship struggles, and they end up separating and end up as best friends. But what is unique about it is that it really deals with the masculine feminine imbalance in the self. And in order to portray that, I've cast a man and a woman in each of the two main roles. So 4 actors play 2 people. The woman is played by a man and a woman, and the man is played by a man and a woman. And it's very theatrical concept. It's like sometimes the 2 women are interacting, sometimes the 2 men are interacting, sometimes all 4 of them are in scenes at the same time. And it's like basically saying any relationship has more than 2 people in it. And so it's an interesting film in that it explores sexuality through dance and through these different characters and portrayals of 2 people.
And it explores gender identity, which is a very sort of a wide subject, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and what I like about, I mean, what I think is interesting about it is that I think that the masculine feminine balance is something that we all deal with, whether we're in a straight relationship or a homosexual relationship, a lesbian relationship. All of us have a masculine and feminine balance that we're negotiating and dealing with in ourselves and with our partners, no matter what the genders are. So this movie is kind of tricky and funny in that, it has scenes between 2 men or 2 women, but they're portraying a man and a woman. So it's a heterosexual relationship, but you're having same-sex scenes and sex scenes in it. Because sometimes a certain part of you is connecting with your partner, and sometimes a different part of you.
Two people playing one person on both sides. So there's a male and a female and a male and a female playing one individual.
No, playing 2 individuals.
Playing 2 individuals. Okay.
Yeah.
Playing 2 individuals, but I see that it's 2 individuals, but it's 2 sides of one person, I guess is my point.
That's 100%.
Right. So you have, it's mind-boggling to think about, but you have a woman and a man playing one individual.
Playing a man externally.
Yeah.
And a woman and a man playing a woman.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah.
So it's a trip. The movie is a trip. It's romantic. It's a love story, but it's about struggle and about the difficulty of feeling like a whole person. And it's a great dance movie. So it's pretty exciting.
Fantastic. Very exciting. So I want to go back in time. Your parents are both Israeli, but met in Paris in a school for mime. Give me a little history of the Boaz Yakin heritage, the family heritage.
Wacky heritage. Well,
heritage. Oh, you're with them now out in the Hamptons.
Yeah, I'm with them out here. They're both. My father comes from a Sephardic Jewish family that moved to Jerusalem in the early part of the 1900s. And, long before Israel became a state. And he was one of 5 brothers and a sister. And he started out in the theater in Jerusalem way, way back in the day and ended up moving to Paris right after World War II to study mime because he was obsessed with studying pantomime. My mom grew up in what was then the suburbs of Tel Aviv near a farm. And her mother actually left Palestine before World War, right after World War II, just as it became Israel, and moved to Paris. And she ended up going to live with her mom in Paris and was sort of taking mime classes there too with a teacher, with Marceau actually. And they met in Marceau's school and they fell in love. And my dad read about the great acting teacher, Stella Adler, who was coming to Paris for, I don't know for what reason, and they really wanted to study with her. And they also wanted to leave Paris at the time because of some crazy complications in their personal life. And when Stella Adler met my dad, she agreed to bring him over to the States, and my dad ended up teaching in New York and brought my mom over. And they opened a pantomime school and my father became a theater director. He directed a huge off-Broadway hit called Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris.
Your father directed that?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
He directed the
Wow.
original production.
I only bring it up because this has a connection to my life. I was raised in Brussels, Belgium as a kid. And
Yes, the home of Jacques Brel.
home of Jacques Brel. Yeah.
Were you raised or you were born in Belgium?
I was born in Manhattan. I was born in New York City in 1962. And 1972, I moved to Brussels at the age of just before my 10th birthday, and I lived there until I was 17. So I was
cool.
raised in Belgium, yeah. So, and Jacques Brel, of course, is the iconic singer of Belgium. Not everyone always knows, unless they know who he is, that he was from Belgium because he sings.
Yeah, people think he's French.
I think he's French, yeah. Yeah. But
so
wow.
Yeah, my dad directed that, and then he became the head of the movement department, movement for actors at Juilliard. And he's teaching there till this day. He's the only teacher that was there the first year Juilliard started in like 1960, I don't remember what. And he's still there today. He's taught there over 50 years.
Wow.
Taught some of the greatest actors in the world. We did a documentary about my dad that's also going to find distribution called Creating a Character, which is a great documentary about my dad. Yeah, so I grew up kind of in the theater, surrounded by it. It's kind of the family business, so to speak.
Completely.
Yeah.
That's so neat. And so cut forward, you're living you're born in New York City. What neighborhood what did you grow up in?
Upper West Side.
Upper West.
Upper West Side, 71st Street. My parents sent me, bizarrely, having us being not remotely religious or Orthodox, they sent me to the most Orthodox Jewish school on the Upper West Side, Manhattan Day School. It was like a yeshiva. So I grew up with this kind of split, schizophrenic existence where at home I was doing all the stuff that you were told you were going to hell for at school, It was weird. And I even went to 1 year of yeshiva high school, which was, finally I had to get the heck out. And then I ended up going to Bronx High School of Science, which was worse than yeshiva. And then I proceeded from there. But I had a very Upper West Side childhood for sure.
Got it. Interesting. And your parents, both my parents are Jews. They're both passed away. But my father was born. I'm first generation American. My father was born in Germany, and my mom's family came from Eastern Europe. And there was an atmosphere in my family of growing up in a Jewish household, but we were not synagogue goers, not particularly religious, and not observant per se. Did you grow up with a certain degree of being observant? Were holidays celebrated? Did you get bar mitzvah?
Not at home, but my school was ultra Orthodox. So we would go to Seders at friends. Sometimes, I had, like I said, a very schizo upbringing.
You were very culturally Jewish, very exposed. But at home, it was not some type of Sabbath lifestyle. And
I always felt guilty about it. I mean, my mom would send me out to the market on Saturday to go buy us breakfast, like bacon or whatever, and I'd be ducking all my people that I knew who were going to synagogue next door. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want them to see me. So it was a bit weird.
Interesting, fascinating. And then you went on to study film. So when does the writer in you start to bubble?
Well, I mean, in order to keep me from going crazy, my dad actually suggested when I was in high school, he had me meet Stella Adler, who was still alive, the great, great Stella Adler. And she allowed me to audit her script interpretation classes for 2 years when I was 16 and 17 years old in high school. And even though I was in a way too young to fully absorb everything she was saying, her breakdown of how to study a play, of how to put it in a historical, personal, emotional, social context, it was such an astonishing class. And it was for actors ostensibly, but I think in some ways it was more valuable for writers and directors. I thought I wanted to be an actor, and I auditioned for Juilliard where my dad taught, and I wasn't accepted, which I'm always grateful for, because the very next year I went to City College and started taking film courses. And I understood that I really wanted to be a filmmaker when I was in City College back in the 80s.
Did you have a foundation of some visual arts, still photography, cinematography, and all of that happening?
I was 17 years old,
Right.
you know.
It gave you.
I had more of a theatrical background, but I'd seen films my whole life. And also I did draw. I drew, and I was a comic book fanatic. So the whole idea of storyboards and visual storytelling was very much in my mind. And then I left City College and I went to NYU for a year. I don't remember what year this is. I think it's like 1985. And while I was at NYU, I had this film teacher. His name was Robert Nixon, if I remember correctly. And he gave like this 2-day seminar on how to get work in the movie business. And it was all about like knocking on the doors of production companies and working your way up from being an intern and I don't know what. And I got a panic attack. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? And I literally pulled him to the side at the end of class. I was like, Mr. Nixon, I was like, how do you become a movie director? And I don't want to hear about all this like working at the production company and stuff like that. What do you do to be a movie director? And he said, let me take you out to lunch, which I'm always grateful for. And he took me out to lunch and essentially told me, you know, there's a lot of different ways. A lot of people start out as becoming script writers and writing their own script. Some people become, I was like, thank you. Got it. Right. And I wrote a screenplay on my own time while I was a sophomore at NYU. And my dad knew this guy who had done some producing in Hollywood. He was the son of a very famous movie producer. His name was Danny Selznick. He was the son of the famous David O. Selznick, who produced Gone with the Wind and all that kind of stuff. And my dad showed my script, which was this like little action movie, actually based on the character of the Punisher, but I changed it so that it wouldn't be the Punisher. And, you know, the 80s was like action movie heyday, right? For like kind of low budget action movies and all that. Anyway, he showed it to an agent who wanted to represent it and optioned it to a producer, to this guy, Paul Monash, who had produced The Exorcist and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And before I knew it, at 19, I moved out to LA to become a screenwriter. I never finished college.
Wow. And this was the birth of what would become the Punisher, released in 1989, or?
Well, it actually never got made, right? But I always liked that character, so that was always in the back of my head. This one never got made. It had a different title, and it never got made. And I ended up doing some I wrote a script for Stallone that never got made, and for this one that never got made. And for that one, I was like making money, but I wasn't having anything produced. And then I knew this guy, Robert Kamen, who was the guy who wrote The Karate Kid, and sort of took me under his wing a little bit, although we had a lot of conflict later. And he asked me if I had any ideas that I thought would be good for a movie. And I just basically said Marvel Comics. And remember, this is back in the day when people were not doing comic book movies. And anything from a comic book was seen as ridiculous and not worthy of being made into a film, right? And I explained The Punisher to him, and he hooked it up at New World Pictures, I think. And I wrote the script for it.
It would have been under Roger Corman at the time. That was the New World was Roger Corman.
No, Roger Corman had nothing to do with it.
Maybe it was not new. Maybe
New Line. No,
New Line. Maybe it was new. Maybe it was another version.
It had that like half sun with the red lines in it. I don't know. Not Roger Corman. But maybe it was New Line. I don't remember. Whoever made the movie. Yeah, you know, and so I wrote it, and they took it, and of course they changed the script a lot, and I didn't really care for it. But it did get made. And that was my first produced movie. I was about 22.
Unbelievable. And then after that, you wrote The Rookie.
Yeah, my buddy Scott Spiegel and I, Scott, who had written the second Evil Dead film, Evil Dead 2, which is a classic till this day, one of the great comedy horror films of all time. Scotty and I wrote this action film, and Charlie Sheen decided he wanted to be in it. He took it to Clint Eastwood, and Clint directed it and starred in it, which was an incredible experience. for me.
Outrageous, right? This is your second film that gets produced, right? Second
Yeah, although it was, that sixth or seventh or eighth film I'd written.
written, of course,
But
but Clint Eastwood directing the film. Hello.
oh, incredible! And the thing that was most, and that was the last film Clint made when he was on his cold streak. I hate to say, Clint was on a big cold streak in the early mid '80s, like, and then like literally after he made The Rookie, he got on his hot streak again. Like ours was the last shitty Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah.
Like like when he made like The Rookie, he was making like Pink Cadillac and like the Deadpool, and and as soon as he made the Rookie, he made Bird, and then he made Unforgiven, and suddenly Clint was like
real Clint Eastwood classic. Yeah, Bird, amazing film. Charlie
But
Parker.
what was amazing about The Rookie for me as a filmmaker was that it's interesting. I'd kind of had it with Hollywood, and I actually left Hollywood for a year. I stuck around just long enough to watch Clint shoot The Rookie. I wanted to become a novelist, and I actually left LA for over a year. I lived in Paris for a year, and which is what all young aspiring novelists think they're supposed to do, right? But Clint allowed me to be on set the whole time he was shooting The Rookie. So I was on set for like 2.5 months, and I just studied everything he was doing. And he's a great director for somebody to study, because he really makes it all up on the set. Like Clint doesn't do a lot of prep, if at all. He kind of shows up, sees where everything is. Sometimes he hasn't even seen the location yet. Depends on the movie, I'm sure. But sometimes he hasn't even seen the location yet. And he starts to stage the scene and work with the camera right there in front of you. So
this is not storyboarded at all.
Except for one or two action scenes where you need to do a stunt or something, car coming out of a window. But everything else is literally like, you just watch Clint walk onto the set and just look around like, yeah, okay. And call the DP over and say, well, what about if he comes in through there and we'll take him in like this? And for a student, it's amazing, because when somebody's all storyboarded and prepared, it's the most boring thing in the world, right? To watch a movie get made, because it's like someone building blocks. It's schematic. With Clint, you could see the thought process at work. So partway into the movie, I could have told you what Clint was going to do with the camera with like a 30 to 40% accuracy rate. Like I got into his head so much that like, as soon as I saw him start to work, I could go, okay, this is how he's going to do this, 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 and this. I was learning. And the other thing that I really learned that was amazing for Clint was just like how professional his sets are, and how calm and how lacking in drama and hysterics and histrionics. He hates that stuff. And it's something that I really took to heart, because I've seen sets that are histrionic and full of dramatics and character conflicts and all that. And there are always character conflicts on my films too, but handling them in a way that's just cool, calm, and collected, if you can, is something I really learned from Clint. So I'm always grateful for having had that experience.
Wonderful. And then this now leads to ultimately to your directorial debut with the film Fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I had left, like I said, I had left LA. I went to Paris.
No, there was like 4 years in between Rookie and Fresh. So there was time there. And so now you're in Paris. Tell me about what happens in Paris.
Well, I moved there with my brother for a year. I was like, I'd been reading Henry Miller. I was like, fuck this commercial bullshit that I've been doing. I mean, there's got to be more to life than that. I mean, I had succeeded very young to be a successful film writer or whatever, but I was writing Hollywood nonsense that I was not very excited about. And my brother was amazing. I mean, he really pushed and provoked me. We had a lot of arguments and fights, but my brother was like, really, like, you can do better than this. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm making, $100,000 and I'm 23 years old. You know what I mean? Like, and it, But my brother was really very persistent in reminding me that there was more. And I was internally also really frustrated. And my friend Henry Miller was always there with me in my mind, and has been my whole life. And while I was living in Paris, my friend Lawrence, who had, been my friend for years in LA, just another broke, scrambling wannabe producer, like most of us, Scotty and myself had introduced him to Quentin Tarantino, who just kind of tangentially had met with us. And Quentin, Scotty especially, Scotty is the one who befriended Quentin while I was away. I never really had that kind of a relationship, but Scotty became very friendly with him and introduced him to Lawrence. And Lawrence produced Reservoir Dogs with Quentin, and it got a lot of heat. And I was in Paris, and actually when I was back just for a month or 3-week visit, I met Lawrence, and Lawrence was like, "Look, Bo, I'm doing this. I just finished this movie. It's getting a lot of heat, and I think I'm in a position that if you write something that we can make for a low enough budget, I can get it produced." So Lawrence kind of sucked me back in. Like I was on my way out, and Lawrence sucked me back in. And I had this idea for a movie about a kid who played chess and dealt drugs and dog fighting and all this stuff. And I did about a half a year of research and all that. I wrote it. And it was kind of interesting when I first pitched Fresh, people were like, no one will ever make a movie with an African American kid as a lead, just the most uncommercial thing you can do. And then while I was working on it, before I got a deal on it, Boys in the Hood came out and became this huge success. And then when we went out with Fresh, everyone was like, no, we already have our black movie. Like that's how LA is, right? Like 1 month they're telling you no one will do your movie. Then there's a hit movie, and then suddenly everyone's saying, oh no, we already got one of those of our own. So it was tricky, but Lawrence found a French company called Lumiere, and they financed the movie, and that's how I ended up making Fresh.
Wow. Clever. And
Lawrence dragged me back into the movie business. I'll never forgive him for it.
There you go. And then it was
I could have had class. Could have been a writer instead of just a bum, which is what I am.
Let's rewind back. I'm curious about this break because I didn't know much about it. I obviously there were these interactions that took you back into the film business, but you were living in Paris and reimagining your life. I mean, other than what led up to Fresh, what else was going on at that time? What were you occupying? Because you were there for several years, right?
No, for like a little over a year only.
Only a little over a year. Okay, so it was like
like a year and like 3 or 4 months, and in fact,
it was a break in the action.
It was a break in the action. I have friends there. I lived a very solitary life, which is my normal way of doing. But I mean, I found a little apartment. I wrote in the mornings. I took huge walks in Paris, which is literally the greatest city in the world to walk in. I mean, I got to know Paris much better than I knew New York, and I grew up in New York. And Paris is the city that you can develop a relationship with without ever talking to anybody.
Absolutely.
Like just develop a relationship with the neighborhoods and the streets and the way the shape of the buildings work. And
love it. Yeah.
Baron von Haussmann, who built it, did a hell of a job. And and it was sort of like realigning my mentality, what I wanted for my life and how I wanted to think about being creative. And actually, while I was in Paris was when the Gulf War broke out. And the first Gulf War broke out. And I was living in the Marais, which is the 3rd district, which borders on the 11th, which is heavily Arabic and is also
right. That's where Georges Pompidou is, the Centre Pompidou. Yeah, right
near
there.
It, right?
Yeah, right next.
Yeah, right there. Yeah. And it's also next to Place de la Bastille, where there were a lot of protests. And I have to say, even as a fairly liberal kind of a guy, the anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism that erupted in Paris during the first Gulf War, when George Bush, had when Saddam invaded Kuwait and George Bush went to war with him, we went to war with him. The amount of anti-Semitism and anti-American was so pointed that I started to feel very just uncomfortable living where I was living. So I came back to the States for like a month in the middle of that year. I mean, the Gulf War only lasted for like 3 weeks. I don't remember how short of it. It was pretty fast. Of course, it got us into a bunch of shit that's lasted till this day. But But I went back to Paris after that. So there was this like month-long break where I was there for 6 months, and then I like left and came back to the States, and then I went back for another half year.
Cool. Interesting. Interesting. So now Fresh gets made, and the next one on deck was going to be A Price Above Rubies, which came out a few years later, right? And you had you probably were doing some writing in between, I'm guessing, and other things.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know how, I mean, I've probably actually gotten to make 2 or 3 out of the like 30 scripts that I've written. You know what I mean? Like I've written a lot of scripts that I really wanted to make, and those weren't the ones that I got to do. I'm lucky enough to have been able to make a living in our field, you know, all this time. But certainly the films I was most interested in often didn't get made. So I wrote, after Fresh, I wrote this follow-up called Flying, about homeless kids living in New York, and I thought it was going to be a really special film, and it never got made. But one of the characters in it sparked something in me, and I developed it into the main character in Price Above Rubies. And Lawrence Scott Miramax's interested in that, and our friend Harvey Weinstein, and he bought it, and we got Renee Zellweger, who had just come off of Jerry Maguire, to star in it, and I got to make that film. That was my second movie.
Wonderful, wonderful. Before we skip forward to all of your film life, you took a left turn at one point in your life to explore doing some graphic novels.
I wouldn't see it as a Charlie. I wouldn't see it as a left turn, because you have enough time to do more than one thing at times. And I was still making.
You added to your life. You added something.
Yeah, I added it. My brother is a spectacularly talented graphic artist. My younger brother, Erez. He doesn't do a lot of graphic. This is the only graphic novel he ever did. He has this incredible imagination and sense for architecture and fantasy. And he wanted to do something, so he had this sort of concept for a kind of Jules Verne-ish story called The Remarkable Worlds of Professor Phineas B. Fuddle. And I wrote it. I wrote it so that he could just go crazy and illustrate the most outrageous architecture and fantasy and cityscapes, alternative cityscapes, and all that. And DC Comics published that. But definitely for me, that was a side project. But my brother really got this to shine in his artwork in that. And then later in my life, I'm really grateful to this guy, Mark Siegel, and my friend Jordan Mechner, actually, who introduced me to him. This guy, Mark Siegel, who runs a company called First Second Books, read a couple of my unproduced screenplays and was excited about them. And we turned them into graphic novels. I adjusted them. And so those were 2 scripts that never got made. One of them I like them both, but one of them is kind of amazing. It's because of the artist. But I wrote this epic history, slightly fictionalized history of my family's experiences in Jerusalem in the 1940s. And this guy, this amazing comic book artist called Nick Bertozzi, illustrated it. And it's just like 450-page graphic novel about Jerusalem in the 40s and the conflicts that went on there. And I'm super proud of that book.
This is all before the state of Israel in 47.
It's sort of right up until it became the state. Jerusalem, the graphic novel takes place between like 44 and 48.
Yeah, so right in.
It's sort of a fictionalized version of my dad's life and my family in Jerusalem when he was a kid.
Wow.
Based on a memoir that my dad wrote.
And do you have family in Israel to this day?
Yeah, all of my family, other than my parents, are in Israel.
Oh wow. Okay.
In Jerusalem mostly. You know, my mom's got a Polish background, and her parents were in Palestine in the 30s. All of their family was killed in Poland. You know, the Nazis killed them all. I think just my grandfather had one brother that survived because he was living in the States, but I have no relatives really from my mother's side. They were all wiped out. But my dad had a pretty sizable family in Israel, and I still have a lot of cousins and everything in Jerusalem and all over.
And have you gone there over the years to visit?
Yes, frequently, although I have to say, I haven't been there in about 9 years. I haven't seen everyone in about 9 years, which
Right.
is, I mean, just shockingly long time. But
Right.
I used to go a lot more frequently.
Wow. Cool. And then in '99 you got the chance to make Dust Till Dawn, um,
No,
where you were a writer. You were a
no,
writer.
no, no. They made Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez made
Oh, I'm
Dust.
just saying, but you were the writer for that.
And
No,
nothing to do with that film.
you had nothing to do with it. No.
Nothing to do with it. But when they were then going to make sequels, straight to video sequels, because my friend Scotty had known Quentin and all that, they were looking to see if Scotty would direct, like, From Dusk Till Dawn 2.
Right. Texas Blood.
Yeah,
Whatever.
Texas Blood. Anyway, so Scotty and I spitballed a story for Texas Blood Money.
Right. That's what I was referring to. Actually, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, the first one was.
I said it wrong. I mean, I knew Dust Till Dawn was Quentin's. Yeah.
Yeah. That's Quentin and Robert Rodriguez.
I'm talking about.
In fact, I think that's one of Quentin's earliest scripts. But yeah, no, I helped Scotty come up with a story for the second one.
Right.
I didn't write it. I came up with a story with him.
Oh, okay. And then it was after that the big explosion with Remember the Titans, huge project for you in 2000.
Yeah, I'm not. That might have been before, or similar time. But basically, I had been having a hard time getting anything made after Price Above Rubies.
And Remember the Titans was not your script, right? That you were a director on that. That's right.
Yeah, I did writing on it, but it was a script that this guy Gregory Allen Howard wrote, and
it was produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. Big project, huge.
Huge Hollywood producer at the time, the biggest.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting experience because I, at that point, had no desire to make those kinds of movies or commercial Hollywood movies, but I needed a job, and I read the script. And they asked me to come in and meet on it. They were looking because it's interesting. At the time, just yesterday, I gave an interview to a writer from CNN. ESPN. They're doing like a 20th anniversary story about the making of Remember the Titans. Like it's become kind of a classic, a sports classic. But like at the time, people weren't making sports movies. Like there would be the occasional sports movie, like, I don't know, like All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise, or whatever.
I think I'm trying to remember when North Dallas 40 was made and some of those films. Yeah,
before they had them, like The Longest Yard and Rocky, of course, was a huge one. But it wasn't like a genre, like every year you've got to have like 2 sports movies. You know what I mean? It was like it wasn't seen as like some commercial genre, right? And so Jerry Bruckheimer, who was like the biggest producer in LA, had this Titans script, and Disney didn't want to make it, and basically agreed as a favor to him to make it, but for like what was for him a very low budget, and it was for a movie of that scale. It was like $20 million or whatever. And so all the usual suspects who Bruckheimer worked with wouldn't make a movie for that kind of a budget. Tony Scott and all those guys. So they were looking for more independent filmmakers who might get jammed in there and pull off something for what was for them a low budget. And I had my real hesitations. I don't like football. I do love basketball. I've been an NBA fanatic ever since I was a kid, but football just never meant anything to me. And I certainly wasn't interested in sports films. But I felt like I had to do it, and I auditioned for it. I did an edit on the script, and I told them how I would approach it. And I got this job, and hence 2 years of my life became Remember the Titans, which was super challenging, both emotionally, physically, and technically for someone who had only made a couple of $3 million movies. And it was challenging making a movie that was so different from anything I'm interested in and still trying to make it good.
Yeah, and was there at some point even a certain amount of study that you had to do of just kind of digging into to really delve yourself more into the game of football in a more detailed way and all of that, or not really? Or you?
No, I mean, I was always like, look, yeah, story. What's the emotion behind it, right? Like, because I'm like, okay, and they were like, you need to know more about football, and I'm like, look, I'm the director. They do two things in football: you hand the guy to someone and they hit him, and then you throw the ball to the guy and then they hit him, right? Like, essentially, that's what you do in football, and you have football experts working on the movie and designing the plays and all that, and it's my job to say what I want emotionally out of the game or whatever. But I never got into football, but the idea of dealing with race relations and young people coming of age in an environment that is so racist and so difficult, and trying to navigate that and come out of it on the other end better, that was something I could connect with and that moved me, and that's what I focused on in trying
and the Denzel character is so captivating.
Yeah, he's real captivating. I love Will Patton as well, so that was definitely something that lifted it up.
Yeah, it was such a heart. There's so much interesting harmony between the people, and there's a very beautiful underpinning of the lighthearted aspect of the team and the players can
we had an incredible young cast, and it's sort of like just alchemy. Like, I've never been able to repeat that. Like, it just works out that way sometimes, that you just get this group of people that just play off of each other so well, and that was really one of those cases.
And then in 2003, a few years later, you did Uptown Girls as a director. That was not one of your scripts either, was it?
Well, no, I mean, there was like I was one of like 3 or 4 writers on it. I mean, there was an original script and then more drafts. Look, that was a weird period of my life too. I mean, I've been really ambivalent about being in Hollywood my whole life. As I left after I did The Rookie to live in Paris to try and become a writer. After I made Remember the Titans, I actually went into a severe depression. I mean, possibly heavily because my fiance, who's one of my best friends in the world now, but at the time we separated. And it wasn't, I was a frustrated young man, and it was very bothersome to me. Now I'm a little more mature, and I wish I could talk to myself as a young man back then, but of course that's not how life works. And I was very upset and hurt and angry that the thing I was getting to be most known for was the thing I was least interested in. Like, I was resentful. I was resentful that Remember the Titans was doing so well, and that's why people wanted to talk to me. I should have just accepted it, embraced it, enjoyed it, and used it to my benefit. But I didn't.
Right. It was hard to exploit its success towards furthering opportunities, maybe that would be where your passion was.
Yeah, well, I got involved in like maybe developing some really big commercial movies after Titans, and I bailed on all of them. And I wrote a script called Roland about an African American in World War I who comes back to the South and gets mixed up in the Negro vaudeville circuit. It was like the best script I'd ever written. And people thought it was great, but people were just not making movies like that, And that frustrated me. And when I made Uptown Girls, I was kind of just going, let me make a bunch of money and make this comedy and try and make it look pretty. And I don't mean that really dismissively. I always try and do a good job, but yeah, make this thing look pretty. I got to work with the great Michael Ballhaus, the DP, who has since passed, and get out of the movie business again. And I actually kind of did. I mean, I had this little horror company that I ran with a few friends that produced the Hostel films. That came out of that. But I also took off for about a year. I was traveling around the world. I was doing other things. And smoking too many cigarettes and contemplating killing myself and all that kind of shit. And
No.
Uptown Girls really was like my last. I was like, that's going to be I'm going to try and make my last movie, and then that's it. I'm not going to do this shit anymore. And in fact, the next movie that I did was a self-financed film. I made with my entire life savings, called Death and Love. which I'm very proud of, but which very few people saw, and is truly unpleasant. It's such a hurt, angry film, but I think it's interesting. And I needed to do that before I was able to go on and make any other films.
And then a little bit later, were you on the Dirty Dancing Havana Nights? What was your?
That was a writing job.
It was a writing gig, so you didn't have to direct on that. And then and then there was a Safe later on.
Yeah, that was after I'd made Death and Love, and I was like, oh shit, I think I might have to make some money again. I just spent every cent I had making this movie. And I was like, let me see if I can write one of them action things like I wrote in the 90s. And in like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I wrote Safe.
Wow.
And I was like,
3
okay,
weeks.
does anyone want to do this? And Jason Statham liked it, and my friend Lawrence liked it, and we made it. Again, it's one of those weird things where it's like, it's not the kind of movie I'm real, but you go, hey, cool, I'm French Connection, like New York action
Asian girl, yeah.
So I was like, look, and you learn every time you make a film, right? You learn how to move the camera better, you learn how to do certain things better. So I try and look at it as a learning experience, even if it's not exactly what I'm dying to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And
keeping one's hand in,
Well, I'm going back to great cinematographers. I think was it on Remember the Titans? You got to work with Philippe Rousselot, right?
Yes, you know what? I haven't seen him in so long.
Because I'm actually quite friendly with him over the years from having worked in post. I worked with him. The last time I worked with him was on a movie called The Brave One with Jodie Foster.
Oh yeah, that's a while. That's like 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's a little while back. That's 2006-ish.
Time flies, man.
But we got, and then I also worked with him briefly on the New York portion of Sherlock Holmes when I was still working with
Philippe is just such a great person to work with.
Photographer, yeah, amazing individual on set, right?
Yeah.
And he used to, when he was doing Sherlock Holmes, I remember he kept a guitar available, and I don't remember what the genesis of his relationship with the instrument was, but someone was telling me that he just liked to take breaks to play.
When we were doing Titans, he was teaching himself the piano.
Okay, so this is thematic. Okay.
So I guess he moved into the guitar.
He moved into the guitar, yeah. Interesting.
He's such a nice guy, and in fact, I have to say, like, on my first couple of films, I worked with an incredible DP, but who was very slow and moved in a way that made things very difficult to do. And I thought that's the only way movies could be. And when I made Titans and Philippe came on, I had never worked with somebody who could make your life so much easier.
Yes.
And I literally wanted to kiss him every day. Like, you would come up with something really difficult to shoot. Like, okay, we're going to start up here and come down here. And they come in and we turn around. And I was just like, waiting for the, okay, we'll be done tomorrow lighting. You know what I mean? And he would say, yeah, that's going to be difficult. 45 minutes. And I'd be like, I love you so much. Like, I mean, he really was the kind of guy who could make you able to do whatever you want on set. I'll always be grateful to Philippe for that.
Yeah, and a very soulful, incredible talent.
Good man.
And in his own right, a tremendous body of work. Not to exclude the work that he did on the Jean-Jacques Benet's classic Diva, where
he shot Diva. That was his, like, when he was a kid,
right?
He did, and he, there's something about some of these like French dudes, and like Philippe would go anywhere and do anything. I won't. Like if I'm like looking at a script, if someone sends me a script and the first page says, fade in on a snowy landscape, I'm literally like the thing can be long.
You're not going to make The Revenant, is what you're trying to tell me.
Fuck that shit. I mean, I don't care if it's Dr. Zhivago or if it's like, I don't care if it could win every Academy Award in the world. I do not give a fuck. A snowy landscape, like, I'm not standing out there for a year of my life freezing my dick off. Like, no way. Anyway, but Philippe shot movies like The Emerald Forest in the Amazon, the bear, like with bear, like Philippe would go anywhere and do anything, like just adventure after adventure after adventure. And he would tell you stories about some of these shoots, and you were like, man, I just don't know how you do it.
Right. Right.
And I don't know why you would do it, but he saw it as an adventure.
Right. And for your stories have been, North American based. They're not all in New York City. You've shot all around, right? But not long adventures. Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'm like, why, when I'm in New York in the summer shooting buildings and hot, shitty weather and stuff, I'm like, why are none of my scripts about like a wet t-shirt contest in Hawaii? Like, why aren't any of my scripts about something that I'd actually enjoy being a part of? But they never are,
And when you wrote, you went on to write Safe, and then after that there were a number of years, and then you ended up, well, in that series of films you also did Now You See Me, of course.
That was like at the same time as Safe, actually.
So they were like writing gigs that happened at that point.
No. Safe, I came up with and wrote.
And you directed, yeah.
Yeah, and Now You See Me was a script. My friend Ed Reichord, actually was his concept, and he pitched it to me to co-write it with him. He was like, dude, I've got this cool idea. Actually, he had come up with that idea a year before, but he had told me it was called Poof, and I was like, Poof. And yeah, it's about four magicians who rob a stage in Las Vegas, a bank in Paris from a stage in Las Vegas. And I was like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And a year later, Ed pitched it to me again. And I was like, Ed, and he said, look, I wrote the first 10 pages. Check them out. And I read Ed's first 15 pages, and they were more or less the opening scene of the movie, which is, I think, the best thing about the whole series. But I understood what he meant when I read his pages, and I was like, yes, I get what you're trying to do. This is a cool idea. Let's do it. And we wrote it together, and it got sold, and of course rewritten, and the movie's kind of foolish, but you do what you got to do.
You do what you got to do. And throughout your journey, you've also made shorts and lesser known independents. There's one that I noticed in 2012 that you directed called Wake the Fuck Up.
That's something I'm very proud of. It's not a short. It's a political ad, not an ad because that makes it sound like it's financed by what do you call it? Like a political piece for the Obama election that Samuel Jackson stars in.
Yeah, so propaganda perhaps, or
propaganda piece. And it's there's this guy Adam Mansbach who wrote a best-selling book called "Go the Fuck to Sleep." Have you heard of that?
I don't know that. No.
It's like a kid's book. It's actually it was a huge bestseller. It's like this book written in the style of like a parent reading what do you call it? Like a nighttime story to kids?
Bedtime story.
A bedtime story to kids. And it's a
bedtime story. Yeah.
Right. So it's an illustrated book as if for kids. And it's like, it's in rhyme. And it's like basically a story for exhausted parents who are like, and it rhymes. And it's like, you've been in the park and you've played all day, and now the time is deep. Please, I beg you, go the fuck to sleep. Like the whole thing is about a parent trying to get the kid to go the fuck to sleep. So we had this idea, or they had this idea to do an ad, basically telling people to wake the fuck up, and not be lazy and not be complacent, because there was a good chance Mitt Romney might win. It wasn't a given thing Obama would win that second term. So we made this political ad and Sam Jackson played a kind of a foul-mouthed cat in a hat who pops up in this family's life. And so, yeah, I co-wrote and directed that with this guy, Kitao Sakurai, who's super talented. That's what that was.
How cool. And then, years later, I got a chance to participate a little bit when I was a GM over at Gigantic Studios, mm-hmm. with the the delivery of your film Boarding School. And I remember even meeting with you once when you were in development on it. What a script that is. Yeah, incredible.
That was an interesting film. It's hard to find right now, unfortunately. I think it's stuck in some kind of legal limbo. It's very hard to see that movie.
It was on iTunes though, no? It was no, it was never on iTunes.
It was short, briefly, and now it's not because of some kind of problem that I can't remember even the company that's distributing it is having with their new owners. It's nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah, there was Global Road that became Open Road. There was E1 in Canada.
E1, that's who. So I don't know. So the movie is like
some of the delivery on it when I was at Gigantic.
Yeah, the movie it was E1 that ended up putting it right, and I don't know what's happened, but Boarding School was. I love Boarding School. I mean, and that was sort of also
the story. I mean,
about a kid who gets basically haunted by his grandmother and ends up wearing her dress and goes to this insane boarding school where he has to defend these misfits that he's stuck with. And it's very influenced by like Mario Bava, the great Italian horror director. And it's not really a horror film, but it is a horror film. And it's also a movie about gender and sexual identity.
But isn't it also a story about children who were sent away from, which is what boarding school is, sent away from their homes to an environment where they're potentially in danger?
Well, where they are in danger.
Where they are in danger. But when I think about boarding school, like I went to a little bit of private schools through my life, but never went to a boarding school, although I certainly knew people that did. And I always felt like boarding school, this is an opportunity for families to not have their kids around, to kind of get them out of sight, out of mind. And so what I find fascinating about boarding school is you explore this idea that they do that, but then they're placing them into something where there's a risk that they're not coming home.
Well,
yeah.
Where that's the actual idea.
That's the actual idea, that the parents are maybe like, maybe we can have a little peace around here, and we'll lose a few of these.
But yeah, it's also a Holocaust film, and it's throwing a lot into the broth. I think it's tough making certain kinds of films in the United States, honestly. I think that here there is such a focus on understanding who it's for and what kind of film it is. And is it a horror movie? Isn't it? Like, things need to be sort of neatly categorized. What kind of movie is it? And the independent films that I make, I find that really boring and constricting. I think that there's a way to do it, but I really push against it. So when I get to do my own films like Death and Love or Boarding School or Aviva, they are kind of batshit movies. Like, they don't fit into a genre. I think they're quite special in their own ways, but they're hard to categorize, and they can be kitschy, but I don't do it in a way that just announces that it's kitschy. I let it sort of creep up. And sometimes I think I've discussed this with Alma, with my ex-wife, who was always telling me people need to understand your intention better so that they can follow a film. And sometimes I don't like to create the intention too strongly from the head of a film and let it kind of sneak up on you. But so I think that some of the films that I've made that are more independent, so to speak, can be a little bit discombobulating, or maybe I'm just not doing a good job. I don't know, but I certainly try to keep them from feeling like they fit into any particular category very easily.
Right. And I think what's interesting is you've taken the opportunity and captured the opportunity to go into these journeys, to do these projects, and to be able to perpetuate that and do that has been a great skill to be able to make that.
Look, but honestly, I wish it was sustainable, but it's not to complain, but like Aviva, which I just made also with my own money, I was going to go into debt to make Aviva, right? And 15 years after I made Uptown Girls, it's like Christmas a couple of years ago, and I get this call that the vice president of MGM, who I know from having made Max, wants to speak to me. And I'm like, oh shit, what did I do now? And they're like, no, it's not bad news. Apparently, you deferred part of your salary when you made Uptown Girls. And I was like, I did? I didn't even remember. And the movie, 15 years later, finally hit that number that you get your deferment. And it was a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
15 years later, I get this like gift from the heavens, this huge check for Uptown Girls. And I literally took the whole thing and put it and made a Viva with it, you know? And I had to spend a little of my own money as well. But like, to me, it's like, okay, great. Every once in a while, I make enough money from like a bunch of screenwriting jobs or an old directing job. A couple of times in my life, I've gotten to take that money and make my own movie with it. Literally twice with A Death in Love and a Viva. I financed part of boarding school myself. And it's frustrating that every time I want to do something that is personal and that has a kind of a unique feel to it, I end up having to pay for it myself. But it's also to be expected because those things don't make money back really for people. And
right.
people don't want to lose their money.
No, although I don't know if you know my old producer buddy who was on one of my podcast episodes. Do you know Michael Ryan?
I don't.
Okay. Mike Ryan made films like Junebug and Power.
Oh, yeah.
Films and, you've seen some of his portfolio of massive independent films. He's got a very good international connection with funding and co-fis in Europe and all kinds of stuff. And he's even done some stuff in China. He's been all around. But he at a festival probably close to 10 years ago, we were sitting down. He's a fellow. I have a bad habit of smoking cigars, so he likes to sit with me and smoke cigars. And one night he sat down and he says, Charlie, I found that the only way to really approach people of high net worth on some of the projects that I do is to get them excited about the story, get them behind the story, and then to let them know that they're making a cultural contribution that they're going to leave behind, and they may not make money. And he says it transparent.
Get a dime
right up
front.
He raised a ton of dough that way.
That's amazing.
Incredible, right? And if you think about it, there are people who want to be in the movie business. There are people who are willing to roll the dice. There are people that if the sum is not too great and what they have is quite great, they're willing to actually go forward, not a la, the story of the producers where in the story of the producers, of course, they want their financiers to lose. That's the goal. Right. But in some cases, people are willing to roll the dice and fall below break even. And there could be a benefit for them to do that. And when you think about European cultural funding, right? Which
we don't have anything remotely like.
We have nothing like that. Think about the United Kingdom, France, Germany. There is a foundation of funding where the funding it's actually for the art. And it's like, you know what? Like even I remember, I think it was Telefilm Canada. I can't remember who over the years, you meet so many of the representatives of this stuff. And they'll say to you, yeah, if the film makes money and we made a contribution under our fund, we recoup. But if it doesn't, that's okay too. We wanted to tell these stories.
This is not the American way.
It's not the American way. So true, right? Yeah, so true.
Well, I've often regretted that I wasn't a European filmmaker.
Yeah, you.
It's a curse. It's a curse to have this mentality and be here. But I'm an American. What can you do?
Yeah, but but you've also been able to do a lot of stuff. It looks like you. What are the films Outlaws and The Harder They Fall? How are they?
Those are screenplays.
Those are screenplays, and so you continue to grind and write.
Yeah, always, because that's how you keep the roof over your head.
Right. So that's
The Harder They Fall is actually a script that a friend of mine was developing for years, and I helped him with the script, and they were it's his dream movie, and it's a $60 million, well, I shouldn't be saying the budget, but it's a big ass Netflix produced all African American Western, or all Black Western, because some of them are British, I guess, like Idris Elba was supposed to be in it. And they were literally about to go, after 8 years of him pushing that project up the hill, they were supposed to start production the day Netflix closed down every movie because of coronavirus.
Yeah.
So it was like they had gone through pre-production, rehearsals, they built this Western town, they had the cast there, you know, and the day before they were supposed to start shooting, they shut the movie down. And now who knows? I mean, hopefully they'll shoot it when people are willing to go back to work. But that was a project that I worked on as a writer, but it wasn't something I was ever going to direct.
Right. I mean, you know, when you think about the world we're in now, we're in a pause, which is scary. But things will come back. There is stuff in the pipeline that's getting finished that was already shot, knock on wood. But we're in a strange moment, and you're, of course, going back to Aviva again to talk a little bit about that and about the theatrical changes. And because, I mean, you know, it's no mystery to the world, although probably not many people have their eye on it at the moment, that companies like Regal, AMC, some of the big chains, we may lose one of them. I don't know which one. I don't have all of the financial reports, but when you take a walk, as I like to do, through downtown and pass by the remaining commercial theater cluster around Union Square, and you see it all boarded up, and you're like, how long can this work? Yeah. And that's a rough thing.
I guess another question is, even when things officially are allowed to open up, how soon are people really going to want to risk themselves to go to sit in a movie theater when they could watch a movie at home?
That's right.
I'm not going into no movie theater anytime soon.
There we go. We'll all be in like this.
I don't know. I'd rather be at home watching it on my TV. Like I don't want to be one of those anti-movie theater people, but I used to hate. I hated going to movies in the winter with the flu. I hate people sneezing next to me.
Right, right. You didn't like to be in an environment like a cinema.
I go to movies twice a year now anyway. Like, you know, and so as a filmmaker, of course, I mean, not having had our premiere at the Paramount Theater at South by Southwest, where like 1,200 people could have sat there and watched.
And it's a communal big screen experience.
And it's your little independent movie that once in your life is going to get to show on a big. I mean, there's definitely a part of me that's always going to mourn that. Of course, the world's got bigger problems, but I'm saying, like, for me personally, that's going to be a loss. But ultimately, 99.999% of the people who are going to watch a movie like this are going to see it on streaming.
Yeah.
You know, so, but what's going to happen with theaters? What's going to happen with all that stuff? It's really going to be interesting to see in a year from now where everything is at. Well,
you talked. I mean, as a kid, I spent a lot of time in France and in Paris, and you talked about walking around the city. One of the great things that the city of Paris continues to support, that is hard to find in pretty much every urban center in the U.S., is it has one of the largest clusters of independently owned theaters.
Absolutely. And they're showing all kinds of movies that you don't expect.
In all these places that are like little theater venues that are not part of a chain, and some of them have calendar programs, and some of them are for current releases. Some of them are combinations, but it's for the love of cinema, and you know, I started my career in 1984, graduating college, and having studied film, and I worked as a movie theater projectionist in an old vaudeville theater in Davis Square in Somerville, Massachusetts. And I used to have to walk up a ladder with 2 metal ICC cases to load them into the booth and show 20-minute reels with carbon arc projectors. You know, a little bit of the romance of of Cinema Paradiso. But I got to tell you, there's something to the cinema. You know,
Of course.
we know. But like you say, in our world now with the pandemic, an already injured form of that we love has now taken a punch to the face again.
Yeah, a really big one.
Yeah. So we're heading in the direction of the home delivery, which we have anyway, and now with a new way to do it, like is happening with Aviva, which I find absolutely fascinating with this ticket thing that they're doing, and amazing.
Well, and of course, I'll always rue the actual movie theater experience, but that it's not there. But you try and be optimistic and do your best with what's happening. That's all you can do, and hopefully hopefully it'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I bring it up, of course, is I'm sure it's not foreign to you about what has taken place progressively each year at the Cannes Film Festival. But one of the things that took place at the last one was that Netflix was not considered to be a producer of movies, of cinema.
Well, look.
And so it became a little bit of a battle, because they're like, and the reason that they got into the battle had nothing to do with streaming. That's the funny part. The funny part had to do with the idea that if Netflix were willing to do an old-fashioned 90-day, they weren't asking for the world, 90-day, which is a little more than anyone wants.
Window, yeah.
90-day window. But even, you know what? Theaters be okay with 60 days. They wouldn't shut their doors. But if you tell them they get no days of exclusivity, adios, muchachos. They don't want to be in that business.
Well, look,
and there
I
is
get it.
Between the two.
When I'm most of my movies, right, up until recently, they were shot on film. I'm still from that, right?
Of course, you are a filmmaker who actually came from the era, as did I, of shooting 35, 16, shooting film.
And they even edited the first film I did on a Steenbeck, not even on a Avid, you know what I mean? But and there was a lot to learn from the Steenbeck experience, but once I got on Avid, I wouldn't go back.
Of course.
And I was dragged kicking and screaming into the digital age of digital photography. Like I hated the way digital photography looks.
Right.
I still don't like it all that much, honestly. It's not a tenth of what film is, right?
Right.
But, so I like I said, I was dragged kicking and screaming into it. But then I made boarding school, and I was able to make it with a crew of 20 people and a fraction of the cost. And it's not just because film is expensive and video is, it's because you don't have to light as much. When you don't have to light as much, you don't need as big of a crew. When you don't need as big of a crew, you can work in a smaller location.
You're with stock and you're working with drives and not film stock. There's no processing, the whole thing.
But it's not just that. It's literally the domino effect of how mobile and small you can be when you're working with digital equipment. It's a big domino effect. So like a movie like Aviva, which I just made, I'm not even going to say how much it was, but it was a tiny budget, and we shot 46 days, cast of 100 people, New York.
Right there, freeze frame, 46 days. When was the last time an independent film shot 46 days? Continue.
And it made for well under $1 million, like well under. 46 days, 100 people, New York, Paris, LA locations, special effects, everything, okay? If that movie was shot even on Super 16, it would have been about a $4 million film, or maybe even more. Like the domino effect of what would have happened in terms of having to get more crew, more like bigger locations, pay different prices. So I've embraced digital now for independent filmmakers. I think it's a gift from the heavens. Like as beautiful and as sad as it is to see film go, fuck film, you can now do anything you want for a fraction of the cost, and it democratizes movies for filmmakers who would have never gotten to tell the kind of stories that they can tell. So It's the same thing with streaming and Netflix. It's like there's always that first reluctance to go into whatever the new situation is. And then there's making the best of it. And you know, I feel the same way with streaming and stuff. It's like, got to make the best of it.
Yeah, and you have a creative opportunity. I feel you always do have a creative opportunity. Showing in a movie theater does not eliminate a creative opportunity. It's just a different viewing experience. That's what it is. So, and it's a different communal experience. But you're still telling stories. You're still making beautiful images, and the work that you did. I mean, I got to tell you, because I spent a lot of time reviewing and going through the last airs of Delivering on Boarding School. That's a beautiful film, and it was a low budget film.
Yeah.
Well done, right? Because
Mike Simpson shot it beautifully. But yeah, you can do all that stuff. And look, for people like Christopher Nolan and Quentin, who, you know, make $100 million films with huge stars, they can say, we want film to live. And I understand their point of view, and I get it, you know. But then there's the rest of us who are not getting $100 million and making films with the biggest stars in the world. And we have to find a way to tell our stories. And digital has actually been a blessing.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. No. It continues to be. And, you know, the one thing that I like that I did, I mean, on John Turturro's film, Fading Gigolo, it was all shot on film. But one of the things that he did that I thought was clever, had it been shot digitally, was he had the opening sequence, and the title sequence was all shot on Super 8, which I thought was very clever. It's actually quite inexpensive. It's like, you know what? There are a lot of tools in the toolbox, and there are a lot of ways to be creative. And we don't live in a world where you're prevented from capturing content without shooting film. We don't need film, and it's and your work has been able to really extract the beauty through lighting and what you've done in post to make the best of what you've captured. So it's not about one thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So. Well, this has been absolutely a wonderful first COVID-19 in social isolation.
I wish it was under happier circumstances, but I'll take it.
I know, but so wonderful. And thank you so much, Boaz. This has been great. And we mark history today in conversations with Charlie and in what we have to do to continue doing what we do in this world.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good to talk to you, Charlie.
All right. Thank you. And continue on. Be well. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.